evil is back. The Drool King Lotor has returned with a dark energy that can destroy the galaxy. Our only hope? The Voltron Force, a team of 5 heroic pilots that control 5 awesome robot lions. When Lotor's monstrous road beasts attack, the lions come together to form Voltron, defender of the universe.
Oh, let's Voltron! Oh, let's Voltron! Oh, let's Voltron!
Welcome, Voltron fans, to another exciting year of Let's Voltron, the official Voltron podcast. This is our first podcast of 2022, and I have to bring on my podcast co-host, Greg Tyler. Welcome, Greg.
Hey, Mark, that was easy for you to say. We've clearly been off for a while. I know I've got a little bit of rust. How about you?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah,
of course we do.
Some of that off. Yeah. So how was your holiday time?
Holidays were good. I had some time off from work, which was nice. So ready to rock and roll.
Yep. Had some time off as well. Had my mom passed away unexpectedly over the holidays, which was very, very sad. But it's a new year, and
I was very sorry to hear that.
Well, I appreciate it. Anyway, so that was obviously unexpected, and I don't want to quote Yoda because that cheapens everything. But she passed. It sucked. But life goes. I'm not minimizing anything. Very devastated by it. But we are here to talk Voltron, something happier. Let's do that. If you don't mind.
I don't mind.
Let's do it.
All right,
and we're going to do an episode review. Is that right?
Yes. So we're getting back to our Voltron Force episodes, and now we're on the 10th one of that season.
Yes, Wanted and Unwanted. We had hoped to cover all 26 of these things last year.
In the 10th anniversary year, yeah.
Yeah, and this is only number 10 out of 26, so we have quite a ways to go. But hopefully that will give our friends at World Events Productions more time to come out with another Voltron production.
Hopefully by then, yes.
That's right. We're doing it for WEP. That's right. Go WEP.
All right.
In any case, yes. So this is Wanted and Unwanted, written by Ross Bealey. It debuted on Nicktoons August 4th, 2011, episode 10, production number 110, story by Todd Garfield and Jeremy Corey, written by Ross Bealey, who also wrote episode 5, Joyride to Doom. Mm-hmm. And do you want to say anything about the voice cast of this episode?
Well, I just wanted to say that you're going to get one character who has a digitized voice, so we don't really know who did that voice.
Yeah.
But you are going to get another character named Cloak, which we do know was voiced by the voice director, Terry Klassen.
That's very interesting. When you told me about that briefly before we started recording, and I was not aware of that. That's great. And another thing that's kind of bizarre is that the script. Thank you again, Webb, for letting us use these scripts to help us with these reviews. Mm-hmm. The script spells Cloak's name with a K, which must mean he's from another planet.
Well, you can't just say Cloak. That would just be the common name. Right.
And
we want to identify this as a character versus a technology.
Yes. Yeah, because there are other kinds of cloaks in this episode. Yes.
Right.
Yeah. So are you ready to get this started?
Let's go.
All right. So we start with the teaser, and the teaser starts it's nighttime in a city on an undisclosed planet. We see this person running around in a hood. It turns out to be Keith, and he's being followed by a person in the shadows who is Daniel. And Keith wants to know why Daniel's around, and Daniel says, hey, he wants to get in on the action, and he wants to have Keith's back. Keith tells him, you shouldn't be here. Not long after that, they both get apprehended by Wade droids.
Right.
The robots of Sky Marshal Wade.
Yeah. So there's a couple of incidents here where Keith is very short with things because he has a plan. Mm-hmm. Okay. And he just hasn't told anybody the plan. But Daniel, of course, is very eager to help in any way. you know, and he also wants to protect Keith as much as possible because Keith is like his mentor.
Right.
So there are a couple of instances in the script where it looked like, they were trying to take out some things. Like there was a part where Keith said, "You shouldn't be here." And Daniel said, "Why?" And in the script, it said, "This isn't a Q&A. You need to get out of here before it's," and then he gets cut off. They took out "this isn't a Q&A."
Yeah, it is interesting throughout the script that there are just a few things sprinkled in to add clarity, but mostly material removed, presumably for time or pacing or something.
Yeah, and then a little bit later, Daniel says, "See, lucky I decided to follow you." And Keith says, "Lucky isn't the word I'd use. Look, this isn't a request, it's an order." Now they took out, "Look, this isn't a request, it's an order." They took that out. And I noticed a little bit later on, they took out another one where he said that's an order. So basically, they don't want Keith, even though he's Commander Keith, to be barking out orders at the cadets.
Yeah, and I will tell you that I enjoyed this episode on the whole, and we'll get to that toward the end. But one of the criticisms I had of Voltron Force in general, as I was watching it back in 2011 to 2012, is that I really felt like, as much as I like the show, Keith's authority on the team is much lower than it is in the prior productions. Defender of the Universe, The Third Dimension, where he's just unequivocally the commander, and everyone follows his orders. I think that probably by design, with the whole form yellow center, red center, all that, it gives everyone their chance to be the boss for a while. Right. I think that sort of democratizes the team a little more, and to Keith's detriment as a character, I think. What are your thoughts?
Well, in those other versions, we also didn't have young cadets. Okay,
that's true. So
you have people that are on the same sort of age level and experience level as Keith, and they understand, we need to follow what the leader says. Whereas young cadets necessarily don't go by what people say, they go by what they think is right. And there's no understanding behind the scenes as to why Keith would be acting a certain way.
Right. That's a good point.
So,
and I guess they're raising these cadets in a new, enlightened way.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Arguably. Yeah. And so that's basically the end of the teaser. And the Wade droids, of course, are Sky Marshal Wade's robots that we've seen since the very first episode.
Yes.
So, yeah. And that's the end of the teaser. So we cut to Swizz Beats and the Voltron intro, and then we're back to Act 1. And Act 1 starts out where basically they're on a ship that's in space, and Daniel finally realizes that Keith planned to get caught. And Keith says that so he can find this thing called the Void. And what is the Void?
Right. So it's a prison.
Yeah.
It's one of Wade's special prisons.
And what makes it such a special thing?
Because you don't know where it is.
Yes.
It's invisible.
It's invisible. And and so basically they are being taken to the Void by Keith's plan. This part is totally going according to Keith's plan. We never really find out exactly what Keith's plan is, but it's interesting to see, because he doesn't tell Daniel, but there's a plan, and this is part of it, except for Daniel being there. And so the Void becomes visible. Whatever this energy field is that makes it invisible dissipates to allow the ship to know where to land, I guess. And they land, and there you go. And I have to tell you that as a longtime sci-fi dork, I did notice that the space station, it wasn't until last night reviewing this episode again that I realized that the dome of the space station, it's the large assembly where we find out there's a courtyard and there's this big open it's like a glass dome with this lattice of structural work around it. It reminds me of a ship called the USS Valley Forge, from a 1972 movie directed by Douglas Trumbull called Silent Running. It was a very long spaceship that almost reminded me of the
Spaceball One.
Yeah, maybe. But it had, I think, 3 or 4 of those domes kind of scattered out around part of the fuselage. And I always thought it looked familiar, but for whatever reason, last night I finally made the connection that it was probably inspired by the Valley Forge, which is pretty cool.
Okay. Well,
Yeah.
I wanted to mention a specific thing they had taken out when they were describing the void.
Yeah.
Because Daniel knows about it. He knows it's Wade's magical secret prison. And he says it actually exists. And Keith said, yeah, but it's not magic. And the part they removed here is it's just impossible to find because it's constantly on the move. They took that part out.
Yeah. And that actually would have answered a lot of questions. Because in this episode, you might think, well, who cares if it goes invisible? You could just, poke your way around in space in your little ship or your lion or whatever.
Right.
If you saw it for any length of time, you could lay down some kind of, spray some kind of mist of particles or something, or fire little low-powered lasers until you hit something. But if the thing can move under its own power, yeah, that would be a harder thing to find.
And he says there's an energy field around that essentially makes it invisible, but it's different if it was invisible and always in the same place versus invisible and on the move.
Right. And that's an interesting thing. I wish that they had kept that line in.
Yep.
Yeah. So Keith does explain that his plan, not how he's going to do it, but he explains that the objective of his plan is to release Wade's political prisoners, which is who he keeps at the Void. A Wade droid very soon afterward scans Keith and recognizes him as a high security risk because, well, he's Voltron Force. Mm-hmm. And a hatch opens below the floor. Keith falls into this something, and the hatch closes, leaving Daniel alone with the Wade droids. And at about the same time, the Void, as the prison, the Void becomes invisible again, which also cuts off Daniel from the rest of the universe.
Right. Now, there's a big section just cut completely out here.
Yeah. What happened there?
So they do a weapons scan on Daniel and Keith. And as they're doing that, Daniel says, so what's our next move? And Keith says, all we really have to do is shut down the cloaking device. And then Daniel says, how are we going to do that? And Keith says, I told you I had a plan, didn't I? And Daniel says, and are you going to share this amazing plan with me? And then once they get grabbed by the Wade droids, Keith says, yes, once we get into general population, for right now, just stick with me and you'll be fine. That whole one was cut out.
Wow. And interesting. There's not a lot of pauses in this episode. There's a fair amount of action, of course.
It moves pretty quickly.
It does. It doesn't feel like there would be room for a lot of the dialogue that got cut. So maybe it was just overwritten and they just it just had too much and they had to cut it out. Interesting. Yeah. And so another thing, did they add a line here about their Voltcoms being taken away?
Well, Daniel just says our Voltcoms.
Yeah, and that wasn't in the script, was it?
No, it's just, hey, I'm emphasizing that, hey, you're taking our stuff.
Yeah. And that's
why
kind of
are you taking our stuff?
That's right.
Because it's like a weapon.
Yeah, kind of a big deal.
Yeah.
So now they're taken into this large courtyard, and it's actually described very differently in the script. This is presumably in the dome area that I kind of talked about, looking like part of the Valley Forge from Silent Running. It's described as looking like an outdoor environment.
It looks indoor.
It
looks like a lot of people are working out, like it's a weight room.
Yeah, the whole thing looks like a giant weight room, combination weight room, and like a school cafeteria or something.
Yeah.
It's got bleachers. It's almost like they repurposed a very large gymnasium.
Right.
And the script also says that the facility is surrounded by cells, by jail cells, and that they're not visible anywhere here either. So
No.
clearly a case of, streamlining the setting to probably, for budgetary reasons.
Right. Now they do describe some of the characters that they want, the way they want them to look and everything. They want them to look like they're hardened criminals. They have scars, they have tattoos, all that kind of stuff. But also realize that they're from many different systems and they all look different. They don't look like people from Earth,
Yeah, and that's a good thing, and that they do stick with for the most part.
Right.
The descriptions don't always jibe with what you see in the episode, but it does get the idea across that these are not just people from Earth, right?
Right.
So I don't even know if it's fair to call this a courtyard, this whole setting that you see for much of the rest of the episode, but I'm going to call it that because that's what the script called it. And in that courtyard, there's an alien that the script calls an octopus head. Doesn't quite match the script description either, but it's as good enough a term as any. What were your thoughts on that character?
Well, he does sort of have like tentacle arms,
Yeah.
but the head, I just don't see it as an upside down octopus head. Now, I don't usually look at octopus upside down, so I don't know. But okay, I'll go with it.
There, it doesn't really look that way. And actually, I think the script even refers to the alien as having a fist at some point. And
I said that's not a fist, that's a tentacle.
Yeah, it's funny because there are some tentacles up there, but certainly not 8 of them. And its arms, they start out with beefy muscular biceps and they kind of taper down into tentacles, 1 tentacle, for each arm.
Right.
But octopus head. What, I don't know what else to call him.
That's what we're going to call him.
Let's call him an octopus head. So he in the courtyard, this thing pretty much it attacks Daniel. It just wants to be rough. And another inmate who we might recognize and ought to recognize as Manset, who we had seen way back in the very first episode, he sends another inmate who looks kind of like a Spider-Man, but not that Spider-Man.
A real spider.
Yes. And the spider character kind of gets between Daniel and the octopus head alien and says, you got to go through me if you want to get to him. And there's a fight between the spider guy and the octopus head. And it doesn't last long.
Because it triggers Wade, what we see as Wade, it's really just a recording.
Right.
Right. Because Daniel earlier saw Wade's image in the Wade droid and he thought it was him, but then Keith told him, no, it's just a recording. Don't worry about it. He's not even really here. So, so the Wade character comes over the loudspeaker and says, it's time for an escape, and what Keith had told Daniel earlier was make sure that you keep these ankle cuffs on because it'll save your life, and Daniel doesn't understand what they're for yet until now.
Yes. So basically what happens is the gravity, the artificial gravity in the room is either, I don't know that they actually turned it off or if it's just the sheer air pressure thing, but basically at the top of this dome, this glass dome with this lattice structural work, there's a vent and the vent opens and that is how people escape by being blown out into space.
If they don't have their ankle collars on.
Yes. And so the ankle collars somehow help keep them ankled or anchored to the floor in some way.
Yep.
And what's really interesting that is something that isn't in the script is that an alien actually gets blown out through the hatch.
Yep.
Yeah. I mean, the script describes stuff being blown out, but actually you see this non-speaking alien get blown out there.
And you just assume he's done for, right?
Yeah. You never hear, they don't mention him. They don't show him ever again, which is probably for the best.
Yep.
But he's gone. He's out. That's what happens. And what's going on? Oh yeah, and so Manset also reveals to Daniel that he's part of the Den resistance, and that is something we haven't heard mention of since the earliest episodes. That was the covert group that Pidge and Hunk and I guess Keith were part of, and well, actually all of them except Allura, as far as we know.
And Manset.
And Manset, yes, he had helped gather some intel for Keith in the first episode.
Manset, by the way, Manset is voiced also Sky Marshal Wade, Manset, all done by Gary Chalk.
Yes, the inimitable Gary Chalk. And so he basically says, yes, I'm part of the Den resistance. And Manset, he does, there's some stuff that he says about what he does for a living, which is also cut from the script. What was going on there?
Yeah. All right. So he says, let's just say I'm the go-to guy in the import-export business. I can get anything, anywhere, at any time. Now, this was something sort of he had mentioned with Keith back in the very beginning of the show.
Yeah.
So I think they didn't feel like they needed to say that again.
Yeah.
Even though he's with a new person.
Yeah. Although it's interesting when Bob Koppler has talked at the various VoltCon conventions, which everyone should go to, by the way, voltcon.org, right? For the 2022 info when it comes out. But anyway, when Bob Koppler and Jeremy Corey have talked about Voltron Force, they'd mentioned that they kind of had to reintroduce all the characters in every episode. So more or less, I would argue that it would have been nice to have reintroduced Manset because, as a guest character, he's a little less memorable than our regulars. But yeah, you don't really need to know. But apparently one of Manset's clients turned him in. And so Wade already knew that Keith was coming and that he had a plan to escape.
Right.
And yes. And so then we cut to a holding cell somewhere in the prison. And Wade himself enters the cell and faces Keith.
Yeah, and this is where I think it cut to commercial, right?
Yeah, the breaks between acts and the teaser in the first act are different in the episode than they were in the script, right?
Yeah, like usually there's some kind of, oh no, our Voltron Force is in trouble, and then they go to commercial,
Yeah.
Whereas here it's just, oh my gosh, Wade really is there at the Void.
He wasn't just on a TV set on the robot's head. Yeah. It is a little unclimactic. Yes. So now we're in Act 2, and in the courtyard, it's mealtime, and Manset tells Daniel that they need to destroy the Void Generator. The Void Generator, we should explain, is a component or a machine at the Void that doesn't generate the Void. It generates the energy field that surrounds the Void and makes it invisible. So they throw around the term Void Generator and Void, and it's a little confusing, but we'll help you get through it, dear listener and dear viewer.
But Wade reveals to Keith that he knows what his plan is.
Yes.
His plan to escape. And then he also knew that his friends were going to come to try to pick him up.
Yes.
So he sent some of his fractals after him.
Yes. Yeah, he had sent basically he knew the Lions were going to pursue the ship. The ship that carried Keith and ultimately Daniel there. And so the fractals basically slowed down the Lions just enough that the ship could get into the Void and the Void could recloak.
Disappear again. Yeah.
Yeah. And again, this was where I was watching the episode in the past without having the script and thought, well, who cares? It just goes invisible. You know where it is. But apparently it can move on its own. You just weren't told that. So there you go. And so Wade ultimately, what does he say here? Wade decides to throw Keith into what he calls a black hole.
That's right. It's like solitary confinement.
Yes, which is very interesting. We got Void Generator. Now we have a black hole, but it's not a black hole as you might expect, which is good because it would have been a lot worse for Keith. It is basically a completely dark chamber that has no gravity.
And it kind of holds you upside down.
Yeah, I mean, whatever upside down means,
Right. You don't really know you're right.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, can you imagine? I mean, in all seriousness, how creepy would that be if you're in a room that is, well, I guess it's not totally dark because Keith, well, they have to show the characters so that the viewer knows what's going on. But presumably, because everything around them is black, unless they just painted the walls.
See,
yeah.
Normally you would know if you're upside down because the blood would rush to your head because of gravity.
That's true.
But in this case, there is no gravity, so blood's not rushing anywhere.
Yeah. It's just kind of hanging around.
Yeah.
And so, but the whole concept of being in a room, but imagine, these in a room that is presumably insulated from you don't hear anything outside the room. You can't see really what's in the room. It's almost like your senses are deadened. And oh, by the way, you're floating. That's creepy.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, they don't really play up the creep factor here because it's it's meant for younger viewers, but
and it didn't last long. I mean, before he heard something.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And what did he hear? He hears another person's in there with him.
And he recognizes the voice.
Yep, it is our good friend Chief Callan of the Lion Riders.
Right.
And it's fun that Callan asks if all of this is part of his plan, and Keith basically says, "Well, almost nothing so far has been part of my plan."
Yeah.
But anyway, so they go back. So we go back to the courtyard where one of the space mice brings, who apparently has been tagging along with Keith and Daniel, but wasn't detected by a scan. Hey, come on, Wade, get on with the security systems. The space mouse walks into the area and has the two volt comms. So off screen, the space mouse was sneaking around the prison and somehow found the volt comms, and they're dangling off of it. Huh?
But guess who sees that before Daniel does?
Our good friend Octopus Head.
Yeah.
Yes. So what's really kind of fun, I always love this capability of the volt comms, which is easily forgotten, which is that they don't always look like those gauntlets that take up your entire forearm.
Mm-hmm.
They're in their little bracelet form.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so the space mouse has the two Voltcom bracelets on its tail, and it drops them on the floor and then scurries off. And before Daniel can get them, Octopus Head does.
Yeah. He thinks they look like pretty jewelry.
That's right. And then doesn't he lick them at one point?
Yeah, it's pretty disgusting.
Yeah.
But Daniel's not deterred in any way.
Yeah. I mean, this isn't like Slippery's Voltron Legendary Defender disgusting, but it's pretty gross in its own way.
Yeah.
So they fight, and this is really interesting. Speaking of Legendary Defender, there's a thing that happens here that I was reminded of in an episode of Legendary Defender. So here's what happens in Voltron Force. As Daniel is wrestling with this tentacled octopus head character, his Voltcom, as a bracelet, is still on the tentacle that Daniel is wrestling with. And the Voltcom bracelet sort of hops off of the tentacle and onto Daniel's, I got the wrong forearm, onto Daniel's forearm, where it expands into the full gauntlet configuration.
Never seen that before.
Well, we did see it later.
Well, yeah. I mean, but the thing about it is both of these characters are shocked that this is happening. Daniel had never seen this before, and of course, Octopus Head is like, "What's going on here?"
Yeah, and he doesn't even know what these things are.
Right.
Yeah. So yeah, but we've never seen this before. Daniel certainly hasn't. We, of course, as Voltron fans, will see something like this again in Legendary Defender, where Keith is able to summon his Bayard from a distance, right?
Right.
And I think they were fighting, and the Bayard kind of went from one hand to the other. Is that what happened? Yeah.
It was
So
pretty
there you go.
cool.
Yeah. Yeah. This is neat too. I kind of wish that they could have continued this sort of thing in subsequent episodes of
Yeah.
Voltron Force. But basically, at this point, because the Voltcom is now looking like a Voltcom, the octopus head guy recognizes Daniel as being with the Voltron Force, and so he basically surrenders Keith's Voltcom as well.
Right. And that's where the line wasn't in there in the original script. Our octopus head actually says the Voltron Force,
Mm-hmm.
because he recognizes it as the Voltron Force once Daniel turns on his Voltcom.
Yeah, and I think without that line, I think this would have been confusing.
Yeah.
I mean, because even in the continuity of Voltron Force, the TV series, the Bayards, the Voltcoms are relatively new gadgets. You know, they were developed sometime after Lotor was defeated and all that stuff, so they haven't been around a long time. So I think this line was good to give some explanation as to why this actually freaked out the octopus head guy. He actually does recognize the Voltcoms.
That's cool.
Yeah. So then Daniel immediately turns around and gives Keith's Voltcom to Manset, and Daniel decides to go hunting through the ventilation system of the Void to find the Void generator, the device that makes the space station invisible.
But what keys him into where the generator is?
I've forgotten already. What?
It's a picture of the Wade droid, but with an X over it.
Oh yeah, when he gets to that facility, yes, he's going through the ventilation system. Yeah,
that means no Wade droids allowed.
Right, which is
Why?
the odd thing to have.
Why would Wade droids not be allowed in the generator room?
I don't know. Yeah, especially at Wade's base. Why would anything that Wade makes not be allowed in Wade's base?
Right.
But yeah, so Wade then we cut back to Wade, who tells Keith and Callan it's time to execute their sentence. And so they're taken out of the black hole. Daniel finds the Void generator room in the exact manner that you mentioned. But before he goes in the room, finds this big weird contraption, which must be the Void generator because it's big and weird. It reminded me, well, not really. It doesn't look like it, but the sheer size of it reminds me a little bit of the atomic piles in the Batcave from the 1960s Batman show.
Yes.
You know, but this thing's got all this crazy lightning stuff going on. Yeah. But what it and the sheer ludicrousness, or is it ludicrosity, of how to turn this thing off? What is it?
On, off.
Yeah, it's a big old lever, on off, and just before Daniel can go from on to off, he gets attacked by an invisible man.
He actually says, "Oh, you've got to be kidding me! It's just that easy."
Mm-hmm. That is funny. And the last line, I think, in the act is when he gets attacked, he goes, "Invisible man. Didn't see that coming." I love the pun. Didn't see that coming. Oh, good stuff. All right, so that was Act 2. Anything else before we jump into the third and final act?
No, and again, it's not one of those, oh no, Daniel's in huge trouble kind of things. It's just sort of, okay, there's an invisible man.
Yeah, and it ends on a pun, literally. It's like a Space Dad joke or something. Yeah, so Act 3 starts. It is weird where all the breaks are in this episode. I mean, we saw where they were shifted around from, the script to this. And it does seem like the breaks are in kind of awkward places. But anyway, Act 3, Daniel and the Invisible Man, who we will learn is called, he's called Cloak. They're fighting in the Void generator room. We go back to, we're in the courtyard again, where Wade and a bunch of Wade droids have Keith and Callan. It's about time for them to escape, which of course means, open the hatch. They're not wearing ankle collars any longer. So, dun, dun, dun.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, this is where I would probably broken Act 2, but hey. So there from Act 2 to 3. The guards release Keith and Callan, and in the chaos, Manset manages to slip Keith's Voltcom back to Keith. which is awfully convenient. But anyway, he does.
That wasn't part of his plan.
Certainly not. Who knows what it really was? I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah. But anyway, Daniel and Cloak continue to fight. Cloak with a K, of course. Cloak says, "I'm not going to let you turn off the void generator." Well, I think that's pretty clear because he's fighting Daniel and keeping him from flipping that switch from on to off. But anyway, we're back in the courtyard and the hatch opens. Keith and Callan are blown out into space. Keith manages to grab the edge of the hatch vent, the circular opening. He's hanging on. Callan was not so lucky. He's out in space. What did you think? Do you remember 11 years ago, 10 years ago, Mark?
Yeah.
Did you think?
I didn't think anybody could survive outside of that, that vent.
Yeah.
And we do hear Keith say something a little bit later, though.
Yeah, but not yet in this
Not
episode.
yet. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and in fact, even earlier in the script, that area outside the base, wasn't it called a thin atmosphere area or something like that?
Exactly.
Which in the script is a giveaway, but here you don't know.
You don't know. You think it's space.
Yeah. The final frontier. But
So
anyway,
it would be like the same thing that happened in Guardians of the Galaxy, the second movie, where Yondu goes up into space above the atmosphere.
Yeah.
And, Quill has the suit, but Yondu doesn't have one. So he dies.
Yeah.
There's no death in this show.
Except for, whatever happened to
Whatever happened to that first guy, I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, no one even yeah, maybe nobody noticed. Yeah. Maybe he was somebody's life-size I don't know, teddy bear or something.
Yeah.
Who knows? But yeah, so Callan's out in, as far as we know, out in space. Keith is hanging on to the edge of the hatch. As the hatch closes, Keith does his magic with the Voltcom and the space armor expands around him. And so then he does something that is described differently in the script than what we see here. As I recall in the script, it says that he forms his Voltcom sword, and the momentum of forming that is what propels him forward, which doesn't make a lot of sense. In this, they animate it in a more real, I don't know about realistic, but in a way that looks more feasible. He basically points his fist down, toward his feet. If he were standing, he'd be pointing it at the floor, and like a beam of light, some kind of thrust or like rocket thrust shoots out, and then Keith begins to move.
Right.
So he heads toward Callan.
Yeah.
And then Wade basically tells his Wade droids to prepare his own space armor. And back to the void generator room. Cloak now seems to be gone.
Now, here's the thing. There's a whole backstory for Cloak that we learn about.
Yes.
Okay. So basically, Cloak was building cloaking technology for commercial use when Wade found out, and then forced him to develop it on a military level.
Yes.
And he's telling Daniel this. He says, then he used this same cloaking tech to invade my home planet, and my people paid the price.
Right.
And then at one point, Daniel had said, why didn't you stand up for yourself? Why didn't you say no? And then Cloak started out saying, these are the questions that haunt me every day. Well, that whole part was taken out. And Cloak just says, which is why I stay here following Wade's orders to protect my creation. It's my punishment, my curse.
Yeah. So what do you think about that motivation?
He feels like he doesn't deserve to leave. He feels like because of what happened to his people, he's responsible.
And so he follows Wade's orders and keeps the void generator working.
Yeah.
That makes no sense to me.
I know.
I mean, I like Voltron, I like Voltron Force, but sometimes to steal an oft-used phrase, you got to call a spade, and Cloak's
Well,
motivation makes no sense to me in this moment.
at one point, they cut out another section where
Mhm.
Daniel is saying to him, "Come on, that's in the past." They took that out. Instead, they just leave the part, "What about those who are suffering from your punishment right now?" That's all he says. But he had also said, "You can still do something to help them. Stand up against Wade with me."
Yeah.
They took that out.
Yeah. So I think that Cloak's character could have used a bit more thought and a bit more time, frankly.
I kind of liked him.
I did too.
I
I
like
just
Cloak.
wish that they had given him a motivation that makes a little more sense.
Yeah.
It doesn't make sense to me that Wade has exploited your technology, used it to attack your own people, your own planet, and so to punish yourself for what Wade forced you to do, you're going to stay on Wade's creepy secret prison and keep what makes it creepy and secret working and
Yeah.
following Wade's orders.
Makes no
Yeah.
sense.
Yeah, I don't buy it. But anyway, back to the action. In space, Keith catches up with Callan, and they begin to rocket back to the prison. Wade now has his fancy schmancy space armor on, and I got to tell you, it kind of gave me 1960s cosmonaut vibes. Did you get that impression?
Yeah, I kind of felt like they should have had a newer technology for him at this point
Yeah.
without hoses.
Yes. But then we couldn't have happened what happens, of course.
Right.
So Wade tells the Wade droids to turn off everyone's ankle collars. And so it's not enough that you wear them. They've got to be turned on, and they can be turned off at any time.
Oh, yeah.
And so now they're going to be allowed to escape too after Wade has exited the hatch. The hatch at the top of the courtyard opens. Wade flies out. Manset has a moment where, and this is a follow-on to something we didn't really discuss.
Yeah, because he had talked to Daniel about this. He said,
Yeah.
"I'm not really the hero type."
Yeah. And then Daniel basically says it's not what you look like on the outside, it's what's on the inside, or something to that effect.
Which I thought was pretty cool for him to say to Manset.
And a good lesson too, right? I mean,
Yeah.
for kids of all ages, right? Don't judge a book by its cover, et cetera,
Right.
et cetera. So Manset has this moment. You see it in his eyes. He doesn't say anything. He lets himself go up toward the circular vent, and because he is a hefty individual, he goes and because he flips upside down en route, his waistline basically is bigger than the hatch.
He plugs the hole.
He plugs the hole. That's exactly right.
And he keeps all that air from escaping.
Yes, and he keeps the inmates from blowing out into space as well.
Right.
So yeah, and so Cloak shows up and knocks out, destroys a bunch of Wade droids, and basically tells Daniel he can exit the station through the ventilation system somehow. And of course, Daniel runs really, really fast, so presumably he can find the exit door really, really fast. He's able to leave because Cloak is taking out the Wade droids. Daniel goes out into space through some airlock that we never see. He anchors himself and Callan to the outside of the prison dome.
Mm-hmm.
And while they're hanging on, he's using like the lion claw, the claw that comes out of the Voltcom.
Yeah.
Keith and Wade are fighting. They're having a space armor versus space armor fight. It doesn't last long because Keith cuts one of those crazy hoses on Wade's outfit
with his sword.
With his Voltcom sword, that's right.
Yep.
And then Wade manages to send Keith hurtling through space, in this field and away from the station. So Wade faces Daniel. Seems like he's going to try to take on Daniel, and And then Daniel says that he knows someone has his back, which is a phrase that you hear throughout this episode. Back at the beginning on that in that Dark City scene, Daniel says he's got Keith's back. Well, he knows someone has his back, and it's who?
The Voltron Force.
Yes.
The
and
Lions.
Voltron. Yes. And this is my favorite part of the entire episode. You see the red and green lion heads come through the perimeter of the field from outside the void. And they are about to they form the blazing sword, basically, which is pretty cool.
Now here's one thing we didn't see in this episode. We didn't see them form Voltron.
That's correct.
Isn't that amazing?
It is.
Voltron gets formed and we don't see it.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
That can happen.
So here's something funny. Earlier today, I watched a little bit of the Defender of the Universe episode with, I can't remember the title. Sorry, guys, I failed you as a fan. But it's the episode with Carp, the arrogant, the arrogant pilot who flies the super fast row beast. They form Voltron twice in the episode. They form Voltron, then they have to split apart and do some kind of a fancy attack, and they form Voltron again. You see both formations. I mean, and this is the inverse of what you've just described. You see them both, but what's fun is that they actually use the two different stock sequences so that each one looks a little different.
A little different, yeah.
Yeah, a little bit, yeah. But yeah, so here, no, you don't see it.
No.
Yeah, that's right. And so one thing I blew over here and missed, and I gotta look this up, is that after Cloak seems to have disappeared from the void generator room, Daniel's about to turn off the void generator.
And Keith tells him not to.
Yes, I forgot to mention that. And it's because it's the only thing that's maintaining any kind of atmosphere out here.
Exactly.
So very late in the episode, you learn that when you're out in the void area outside, when you're in the void outside the void, you're not necessarily going to die.
Now, that's if that cloaking is on.
Yes.
Okay, but if the cloaking is off, that's dead space.
Yes. That's right. Literally dead. Well, the people
there you
are going to be dead. Yeah. And so I'm going to ask a question that I probably shouldn't ask. Why would Wade have done that? Why would he have designed a base where your cloaking field also gives you a thin atmosphere when he loves to play with his inmates and shoot them out there?
So what that means is that first guy who got thrown out, maybe he didn't die.
Until the base ultimately became visible.
Well, as long as they were
Because
still
it did.
cloaked.
Yeah. Yeah. But by the end of the episode, you see
they're
the base.
uncloaked. Yeah.
Yeah. So
because Voltron ends up taking apart the one part and then keeping the part that has all the inmates in it.
Yeah. So Voltron forms Blazing Sword, literally slices the courtyard, the big dome part. It's connected by like a little stalk or something. It's kind of like Cloud City, you know, that big tower in Empire Strikes Back.
Yeah.
It looks kind of like a cheeseburger on a stick.
Right.
Well, this thing is like a dome on a stick connected to the rest of the prison.
But Cloak is on the part that gets separated and just floats out into space.
Yes. And so that's what happens. And, they talk about how, they've managed to free everyone. And Daniel makes a remark saying, well, some people think they deserve to be here. And you see Cloak. I can't remember. Do you actually see him through a window at that point?
Yeah.
You see the station drift off.
Yep.
Yeah. And as I recall, in the script, but not in the finished episode, it says that the rest of the station recloaks as it drifts away.
Well, as far as to the rest of the inmates, though, Keith is talking to Callan, and Callan says, "What's going to become of these people?"
Yeah, they're back in the Black Line at this point, right?
Right, and Keith says some deserve to be free because they were put there as political prisoners of Wade, but some don't. But no one deserves to be in the void.
There you go.
So they're going to bring all these people back to somewhere. Some are going to go free and some are going to go to a prison, but we don't know where.
Yeah. Well, here's the other interesting point. At this point in the series, Wade is still pretty much in charge of the entire Galaxy Alliance. So where would you take any of these people?
Exactly. Yeah. It would have to be on one of the planets that's loyal to Voltron.
Yeah.
But I mean, this is part of the job of being a Voltron Force member that I probably wouldn't like.
Yeah.
I'm trying to, do the logistical part of taking people who were put into a void and now taking them to a prison. That can't be much fun. That cannot be much fun.
Yeah, that's tough. I imagine maybe they make Karan do all the paperwork.
I don't know.
Yeah. But so then we go back to the last scene takes place on Ariel. The Black Lion alone lands and Callan exits and vows to Keith that the Lion Riders will have the Voltron forces back.
That's right. We will always have your back.
Yeah.
Yep.
And that's it.
So that common theme went throughout the whole show.
Yes. Yes.
Everybody's got everybody's back.
That's right. Except Wade. Oh, Wade. He's a pain in the backside. That's about as far as it goes.
So what was cool about this episode? Okay. Number one, at some point, we didn't see Hunk or Alora at all, did we?
I don't know. I don't think we did see the full cast in this episode.
No, we saw Pidge. We saw Larmina. We saw Vince. I don't remember seeing Alora, Hunk, or even Lance.
That is a good point. But what is also interesting is that the full cast is credited in the episode, even though I don't think they say lines. Yeah. So, I mean, it's got the full, all the pilots and cadets are credited, which is very interesting.
It was really weird because, I mean, a lot of it's Keith and Daniel, obviously. But then there's the other characters like Manset, and Wade. Mm-hmm. But then there's some other characters that like we've seen before, like Callan, right? Mm-hmm. And then Cloak is sort of new. Obviously, Octopus Head was new. But we didn't see some of the characters that we're used to seeing in an episode, like Alora, Lance, and Hunk.
Yeah. Which, I think it's kind of refreshing not to see every character in every single episode.
Right.
I mean, some people poke fun at the Vehicle Voltron episodes of Defender of the Universe for having a cast that's too big. Well, I would argue that having to focus on 8 characters in every episode, which 8 heroes, as this show does, that's a tough balance from episode to episode. So it was kind of nice to kind of narrow the scope in and focus on just a couple.
And the setting was completely different than we're used to, too. So a space prison somewhere where nobody knows where it is.
Yeah, I mean, the Lions were barely in the episode. You saw them in space waiting for the void to decloak so they could do something.
Yep.
And then you see Voltron at the very end, showing up and slicing the prison in half. It's kind of cool.
And he didn't fight a Robeast.
Yeah, no Robeast either.
Right. So there's a lot of things that you would typically say as part of Voltron, but it wasn't in this episode.
I liked it. It's nice when you go off the pattern there. I mean, Wade could have just as easily made that entire prison a Robeast. Sure, it's Voltron, and then these arms fold out, and here we go again. But
yeah, like that was part of his plan to stay one step ahead of Keith.
Yeah,
would have been all right. You're going to pull Voltron out. All right, well then I got something for that.
Yeah, it's like that Defender of the Universe episode where Hunk has been using that construction machine to build that sports arena on planet Eris in the original series. And Lotor, of course, and Hagar put some kind of a demon in it and makes it turn into a Robeast that Voltron has to fight. I mean, it's just like a giant bulldozer, basically.
Yeah.
They didn't do that with the prison, so that was great. I really liked Cloak, except his motivation makes zero sense to me. I love the idea of someone who feels guilt for something he's done. Feels like he needs to pay some kind of penance, but it feels like he's supporting the very person who made him feel so guilty. I mean,
Yeah, but I mean, imagine if you're this brilliant person who makes this really cool technology, right? And you're thinking about it from the standpoint of good, not evil. But Wade goes and uses it for evil. All right. And then he uses it against you, who are the basically the inventor of the whole thing. And then he uses it against your people.
Yeah.
And what are you supposed to do at this point? You think, if I hadn't invented this technology, my people wouldn't have suffered. So you feel that kind of guilt.
Yeah.
But you also have to understand, if you invent something, there's always a chance somebody could use it for good, somebody could use it for evil.
Yep. And that's life. I mean,
think of lawn jarts. Remember lawn jarts?
Oh, yes. Yes.
The darts that were metal, and you throw them up in the air and you try to land them in a plastic circle.
And try not to land them in your family members. Yes. Yeah.
But hey, kids are kids, right?
That's right. Or those 1950s chemistry sets they used to sell with actual radioactive material in them. Yes. Anyway, I don't know if there's much good that could come out of that. But yeah, unless you want to develop, powers and become your own Marvel Comics superhero. I don't know, but yeah. So I mean, I'm just thinking, if I were in Cloak's invisible shoes, I think I would have found a way to disrupt my own technology. I mean, if you really feel like your technology has been misused, then I think finding a way to circumvent that technology. And if there's anybody who could do it, it'd be the person who invented it. That would be
Yeah, don't forget this all takes into account about invisibility too.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of times people are asked, what kind of power would you want to have if you were a superhero or something like that? And some people have said, I would like the power of invisibility. Well, invisibility brings with it a whole load of problems too. If you're sneaking around other people invisible, sometimes that's not a good moral fiber type of thing to stand behind.
No. So, there's a part of me that wonders, this is another one of those things that happen. It's like in Knight Rider, when they would develop some new gadget and kit that you would see in one episode and never again. Yeah. Like the ability of Kit to drive on water was in one of the episodes. And after that episode, never again, never mentioned. Why do we not see this technology again? And you could argue, well, maybe Cloak, as the developer of the technology, is the only one who could turn it on and off. Well, that switch was awfully easy to use.
On, off.
Yeah. And if Wade were able to use that technology to invade Cloak's planet, unless Cloak himself were the person maintaining that technology on the machinery that Wade was using to attack his planet, that it stands to reason that other members of Wade's army or whatever would be able to use it too and maintain it to some extent.
Yeah.
So it's one of those things where you just don't think about it too much.
Sometimes things are too user friendly.
Isn't that the truth? On, off. Anyway.
The shortest distance between 2 points is a straight line, right?
In Euclidean geometry, that is correct. Yeah. So, I really did like when I finally got yesterday, when I finally realized, hey, that dome looks like something out of Silent Running. It's like when the dock or the repair bay inside of the Castle of Lions in this show, where you see the lions all gather. It reminds me of the superstructure from Star Trek, the motion picture, where the Enterprise was being rebuilt. I love those kinds of tips of the hat, whether they're deliberate or subconscious, or the Krelshi looking like the the monsters of the id from Forbidden Planet who had evolved from the Krell.
Right.
I love that stuff, so that's always fun to see too.
Well, we didn't get to find out from the writer what they were thinking, when it came to how things look and all that kind of stuff, because we didn't have them with us during this review.
Right.
But I have some good news.
What is that, Mark?
Next week, when we review the next episode of Voltron Force, which is number 111, Predator Robeast.
Predator Robeast, right?
We will have the writer with us.
That is going to rock.
Yes.
Adam Beechin.
Yes. So we are looking forward to having Adam on the program with us next time.
Yes, that's going to be fun. Predator Robeast is pretty much nonstop action, start to finish. The stakes are very high.
Yeah.
Every Voltron show has its combiner Robeast, which is always the most memorable, almost always the most memorable that you see in the entire show. This one is definitely one of the standouts from Voltron Force.
Yeah.
So, yes.
No spoilers. No spoilers.
Nope. There might be a fight. How's that?
Maybe.
No,
but who will win?
Robeast. Oh, who will win? Yeah, Voltron and the Robeast are just going to sit there and play cards or something. Go fish.
Yep.
No. Yeah, it's good stuff. It'll be great to have Adam on, and we'll ask him about his time on Voltron and various other things he's worked on.
Right. So we're looking forward to that on our next program.
All right. Well, it's been great to see you again, Mark.
Yeah, it's been great to see you too.
Yeah, and to all you out there in podcast listener land and YouTube viewer land, we're glad to have you aboard. And,
thanks for
joining us next time.
Thanks for joining us in our 9th year of the podcast.
Wow. When will the podcast develop gray hair?
I don't know. But,
okay.
but one of the cool things is when you look back on some of our episodes and you look back on some of the things we've done, and you can use the word vintage with some of those things, that means we've been around a pretty long time.
Yeah, isn't that something? Wow. That's crazy. We still got to find a way. I think we started doing the YouTube video version of the podcast with podcast 200. Was that where we interviewed the legendary Defender voice cast?
Yes. And that was a good kickoff with all this stuff because of everything that's going on with the pandemic and the wider use of Zoom, so it was a good chance for us to transition into something like this.
Yeah. And we don't have that for the first 199 episodes, but you can always find those wherever podcasts are sold or.
Oh yeah. I mean, Alexa, Spotify, Google, Apple, everywhere podcasts are. Yep.
And they're still there. That these newest ones are, just because they're on YouTube doesn't mean they're not in their traditional spots. So
right. And it's also all on letsvoltron.com.
Yep.
So we're still out there on all those social media things too. We're still on YouTube. We just haven't done many videos lately.
That's true.
Yeah.
I'm not going to go there. I love doing the toy review videos that I've done, but my goodness, they take a lot of time. I don't have, I don't think either of us has that productionized like a lot of the people who do that for a living.
No,
like
they can do it lickety split like this.
Yeah, like Pixel Dan or MGo from Freakin' Geek or Optobotomus or all those other awesome people. Yeah, but anyway, they're fun to do. I'm sure we'll get around to doing those again at some point.
Right. So we'll see you all next time on
Let's Voltron.